Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Absolute Game of Nerds, where we talk about the 10 things we wish we knew when we got into collecting. And you can hear someone is trying to break into Rohan's safe house.
Yeah, there's someone
And so-
drilling up above me, so you may hear it like that right there. So I apologize.
We're going to hear
for
Imperial
that.
troops have entered the base, Imperial troops have entered the... and then it's done.
So today we're going to talk about the 10 things we wish we knew when we started collecting. Both of us kind of recently just started again in the last year. Before we get into that, though, we wanted to do a quick little few minutes on Ant-Man coming out this week. Obviously, when this airs, Ant-Man will already have happened. So JP, first off, have you bought tickets yet to go see Ant-Man this weekend?
I will see it because my movie theater does not get crowded, so I'll be fine.
Yeah, so I bought tickets for Friday night, and I bought them on Sunday right before the Super Bowl started. And at the theater I was going to, which is the one I go to always, there wasn't a single seat sold. So I got like the middle of the seats exactly where I wanted. So yeah, it's not like, yeah, you could definitely see it. But so real quick, do you have any predictions for it? Because obviously when this airs, the movie will already have happened. So, but this is right now, as of now, we're 3 days before the movie comes out. Any predictions for the movie?
Okay, my first prediction, and I bought a comic for that reason, was Micronauts will appear in the show.
All right.
The Micronauts.
So I'll go with 2. So I've said this from the beginning, even before I knew anything, but I feel like Paul Rudd Ant-Man, played by Paul Rudd, is going to die. Just because I think he's a big actor. He's done a bunch of movies, and he's probably maybe wants to do other things. And plus, I think it makes a little bit of sense. Like, how do they make a movie like Ant-Man, who is not as big of a character as Iron Man or Thor or Hulk or whatever? How do they level up to build up to Kang Dynasty using an Ant-Man movie? And I think him dying really ups the ante for the other heroes to be like, this is no joke. This is a big deal. Like, Ant-Man's gone. This is for real.
So is his daughter going to take over then, you think?
What's that?
His daughter going to take over then?
I think his daughter will kind of fill in that role. Yeah, I think she'll probably be is my guess. And then the other prediction that I've heard, I just want it so bad, so I'm going to say it now to hopefully will it into existence. Either at the end or post-credit, you get some kind of glimpse of the Fantastic Four, right? I know some people have said, like, maybe you see them. I would lose it just if, like, let's just say there's a shot of Paul Rudd and all of a sudden you just see this, like, outstretched hand come over and put his hand on the shoulder. And that was it. Like, I would still with that alone lose it. So
yeah, because they haven't casted anybody.
No,
they haven't casted anybody. So
the outstretched hand makes sense, right? Because that doesn't take anyone casted.
Or you can see the Thing, or maybe see 4 people, a shadow of them.
Exactly, or like flames of some kind and like some moving object kind of thing.
Yeah, so my only prediction is that Micronauts, and that just kind of from others, but I heard there's 2 post-credit scenes, and I'm hoping, like you said, something that this movie is supposed to propel forward Phase 5.
Well,
there's got to be something in there.
Kevin Feige literally came out and was like, "This is the first movie that really moves the MCU forward," right?
And I tell you what would be cool is Doom, maybe.
So I don't want Doom yet because I want to get Fantastic Four 5 before. My goal is I got ASM 129. I'm gonna try and zero in that. I just put up some books on Diamond Club, so if they sell, I can get my ASM 129, and then my goal is all in for FF5 by the end of the year. So I don't want Doom to come out because if he does, that book's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has been, and
I wish I had the money now because the book is actually in a good spot right now to buy, I think. So
what are you seeing that book at?
So I would be looking at like a 1.0 to 2.0 range. So it'd be kind of similar cost as like a mid-grade Hulk 181.
That's like $5,000.
I would say more like I would
3 to
probably
5?
shoot like in the 3s. Yeah. So it's going to take me some time to build up the pot to get to it. So that's why I said hopefully by the end of the year I can make some side hustles to get up to it. Because I decided like my goal is that by the end of the year before Doom comes out in the MCU, and then I think I'm fully committed to then going after X-Men 1 before as like my one goal for 2024, because I think in 2025 you're going to start getting X-Men coming in hot.
You get the Jim Lee one, you'll be just fine. Just get the
What's
Jim
that?
Lee one get the Jim Lee X-Men from 1991, and you got it.
Well, one of the books I posted for on Diamond is a 9/8 Magneto cover signed by Jim Lee. So hoping to get a little bit of return out of that one.
Yeah, that's it. I think that the giant size X-Men will be the one to have when you already have that one. I don't know about X-Men 1. I don't, but hey, doesn't hurt to have them all, right? So
no, and X-Men 1 is one that I'll always want, right? That and giant size X-Men, like I will always have a love for those books, and so I definitely want them.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's get into
but
this.
That's part of what we're going to talk about. I think is that the love for these books and what it makes you do, and what we wish we didn't do because we love these books. So
yeah, so we're gonna go back and forth. We each got a list of around 10 things that we wish we knew when we started. I'll go, and then JP will go. We'll go back and forth. However, we haven't seen each other's lists, so we may have the same thing. So if one of us says something that the other also has on their list, we're also going to kind of like combine for that item. But I will start off. So my number one thing that I wish I knew and had knowledge about before I did anything on this was just cleaning and pressing of books. I had heard of it vaguely, especially the pressing part. I really didn't even hear anything at the time when I started on cleaning. And so like there was some books that I got signed early on and then off the CGC to get the yellow label. And I didn't even think, I honestly didn't really know too much about grading at that time. And I didn't really know that I should have gotten those books cleaned and prepped for grading. That way I could have maximized the value I had been able to get up. And now most of those books from those early days, I have already flipped to get to bigger books. And so it would have just helped me get more out of them if I had known that when I first started. And I will add to that, since it is talking about pressing, if you do submit a book to CGC for one of their signature events, I would recommend doing the post press that they do at CCS, which is their side company, for $20. It adds 2 more weeks usually to their lead time or to their turn time. But you often hear these stories about how when the artists are there signing things, they can be pretty rough, especially when like you're Todd McFarlane and he has like 7,000 or not even tens of thousands of books to sign. He's not going to be all delicate to keep your 9.8 and 9.8, right? So I feel like the $20 is well worth your. And you also clean them and press them before you send to the signing event, and then I would add the post press just to be an extra layer of security. To again, it's all about maximizing your value. So that's my first one.
Pressing, that's something, again, I didn't know about either. It's not on my list of items, but I was always weary and still am weary of sending my book. Nothing against anyone who does that, but I don't know anyone well enough to send my book to press to make sure it's the book you sent out there. So I'd be more comfortable doing CGC, but the turnaround times I thought were much longer than the 2 weeks.
If you do CCS at CGC when you get just without the signature event, the turn time is going to be like a freaking year. Don't do it. In that case, ask us. I have a handful of recommendations on pressers and cleaners now because I've researched and done some. And ask anyone, right? There's a lot of people that will, happily tell you like, oh, I use so-and-so and they're great. Even if you watch other YouTube videos, like people like, oh, I use like Ryan out from Automatic Comics. I can't remember who he uses, but he always says he uses this one guy. And they're all on Instagram. You can just find them and message them and go from there.
And Lunch Money uses that Comic Spa, which
Comic
was a cool
Spa,
name
yep. Yeah, great name for a cleaning. And he highly recommends them.
So yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea. I guess for myself, I would just find that higher grade book and, try to flip it that way to buy the higher grade book than pressing, because I'd like to learn to do it myself, but
I'd even tell you that, like,
machine.
Even if I bought a brand new book, like a modern comic, which I don't collect, but if I bought it right off the rack and I was like, this guy's potential, I'm going to go get it graded now while it's cheap, I would still get it pressed before I had it sent, even though it was brand new right off the rack, just to be safe, right? Because those modern books, you want that 9.8, because everyone's going to have a 9.8. So you want the 9.8. Right. Might as well spend 50. Cleaning presses typically average cost is $15. Now they have more extensive treatments and whatnot. If you want to talk about that, I mean, get into that, you do some research on that. But like the standard dry clean and press is $15 at almost everywhere that I've seen.
Yep. Well, all right. Well, I'll go with my number 10, and I'm going to switch this up again. I don't have anything on cleaning and pressing. I think that's a great idea. I just wish it was somebody I could see take the books, drop them off, and then pick them back up. So I don't have that
Yeah,
convenience where I'm at.
I'm
But
with you. Like the idea of like, I mean, I don't even like the idea of mailing them off to CGC to get graded. Like, I
right,
don't like the idea of once I have the book, I want it in my possession.
you have no control once it's shipped out, and
Yeah.
all that worries me. So,
Like I was actually talking to the
but
guy I talked to on Instagram. Sorry, I did interrupt, but real quick, like he's looking to upgrade his X-Men 1, which is a 2.5, and he wants like a 3.0, 3.5. So he's been trying to like do like a trade plus cash for it for someone that has like a 3.5. His other option he's looking at is cracking his and getting it cleaned and pressed in like one of those more fancier treatments. And I was like, that would, if that worked out, it'd be probably save him a couple $100 because you have to regrade it still. But he's without his book for the time it takes to get it cleaned and pressed and the time it takes to grade. Versus if you had someone that had a 3.5, that, you know, maybe it costs you a couple $100 more, but like then you never have to lose your book. So
right.
that's,
And again, we're in a time where we can get, I can't, but probably you can, being where you're at. You buy something on Amazon, and probably that day or the next day you're going to get it in the mail, right?
Yeah.
It's going to arrive. So waiting a year for a book to come back, waiting a couple months, waiting a couple weeks is just, for us, unheard of. But years ago, people waited, you know, they took a horse. They didn't take a car.
And that's the thing
Go
too
back
with,
hundreds of years. So
cleaning and pressing. I mean, there are some faster, and I found one that says they're faster. I'm going to use them when I do my next submission. But a lot of press will tell you they're 6 to 8 weeks to get to your books, which sucks, right?
Yep.
And you're going to have another month. Let's just say
it's not an easy process. It's
Yeah.
involved because you need at least a day to let it sit, and so
Yeah.
that's it. But my number 10, I'll put that on, is watch more YouTube videos, which I would have learned more about cleaning and pressing.
Yeah.
About, you know, just various little, you know, instructional videos, not your top 10 list. I'm not talking that. I'm talking instructional videos on the hobby itself would have been helpful, from how I started. Again, that seems simple, and we've watched plenty of YouTube videos throughout, but, you know, I should have started just with that. But again, when you get into it, you start in one corner, and you might make your way to a different part of the collecting itself. So your tastes are going to change over the course of time. So the video you watched in the beginning may not be as relevant later on, but definitely do the research as much as you can and not just fly in blind. So
yeah, and I think for a future episode, like it'd be fun to do like our top YouTube and Instagram kind of feeds that we've learned knowledge of all the spectrum when it comes to comic books.
Yeah, I would agree. Yep.
You got anything else for that, or I'll move on?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so my next one again, like, and I've mentioned this before when we did our recap of 2022, and a little bit I talked about it just before in my first point, but signatures. So I, you know, have a background in when I was a kid growing up, I loved collecting sports cards and things like that, and sports memorabilia, and so as a child, getting a player's autograph was like the biggest thing that could ever happen. Like when Gary Payton did a signing event at the local J.C. Penney, we like went and waited for 2 hours and got Gary Payton's signature. Like that was what it was all about. So, you know, I had a similar love of thinking about when I first started that getting comic book signed would be really cool. And so I invested in, you know, a decent amount of books getting signed. And a lot of those books I've now since flipped because, you know, they weren't necessarily big books. I just thought it was cool to get them signed. But like to get them signed, especially if you're doing the CGC route and you want to do the yellow label, like because the artist or the writer is going to have their signing fee. And if you're going to get it graded, they usually have an even higher fee. Like they may say a signature is $5 to $10, but if you're going to get a graded signature, they'll say it's $20 to $25. Or some people are even higher. Like Rob Liefeld, like he won't sign New Mutants 98, for instance, for like unless it's like his fee's like $150. And so it's not cheap necessarily to get them signed, and then you have to then pay for the grading fee. And if CGC isn't at the event that you're sending them to sign, right, you have to pay the facilitator a fee. Like it does add up. And I will say this, if you like signatures, by all means do it. But my advice is do it for a book or any books that you would consider forever PC. And why I say that is because the books forever PC, or at least, you know, for the long-term thought or short-term is forever PC to you, it means something special to you, right? And so if adding that signature to it adds to that sentimental value, it's worth it, right? That's what I think about it. But if you're gonna use books to get to other books, in my opinion, I would not get them signed, because there are a lot of people in this hobby that do not like signatures on their books, no matter what. Right. And so all you're doing, if you're going to use a book to flip, in my opinion, is if you get it signed, you're shrinking your pool of potential people you can make a deal with. All right. Secondly, from what I've experienced, the only books that are going to get you good value on a signature is Stan Lee, probably Jack Kirby, because and both those guys are long gone, right? So people would like,
Right.
They're long. The only one even alive, I think, that would get you some good value is Todd McFarlane. And in all reality, when you saw how many books he just signed at CGC, the market is going to be flooded with Todd McFarlane signatures. Like, they're not hard to get, so I don't think the premium is going to be that much of an ad. So I just don't think you get the value you want when you get a book signed. So do it if you want to keep the book and it means something to you. But otherwise, my advice, it's a waste of money.
Yeah, I don't have any signature books. Excuse me. I have one I bought in a dollar bin. It's a Dreadstar 1 signed by Jim Starlin. It's not graded. I'd have to send it to CBCS for the grade, because they are the ones that don't need to be certified, which we talked about that on one of our shows before.
But that's a perfect example, right? Jim Starlin is a legit, bona fide, big-time artist from the comic book world. And he found his signature in a dollar bin, right? Like, it's just, they're just
But
not.
it was unverified. It's unverified. I have like,
I mean, still, like, you could buy a Stan Lee book if it had a Stan Lee signature on it. Would not be in the dollar bin.
No, Jim Starlin's in there because it's not verified. And I did find some Batman signed books. I don't even know. They're just the writer, the artist, and they were cheap. But do I want to spend the $20 or $30 to send these books into CBCS to get them graded and have them, verified, but not
witnessed
signature from them? So I thought about it, but what are you going to get out of that book? Maybe get $50.
You're not going to even make your grading fees back, probably.
Yeah, probably not. So I'm not into signature books. I may buy one, like you said, because these McFarlanes are going to come in pretty easily on the market. But I'm more of the line of, I want to see them sign it and not send it in. But I also heard from a friend that said, you don't ever want to meet your heroes sometimes, and you may be disappointed when you meet those guys and they sign, or they're a jerk. Not that they all are. I'm not saying any of them are or are not. I'm just saying that it may not be the best experience. So sending them into CGC may save you the hassle, waiting in line, being aggravated because there's a guy in front of you or a girl in front of you with 100 books they want signed.
Yeah.
So the CGC route's great. I'd love to meet them and talk to them. Not to get the signature, though, but that would be part of that meeting process. Wouldn't get a signature on something, but it's not the end of the world for me. I'm kind of okay having the book and meeting the person. So
yeah, so that's why our goal is grow this podcast big enough so we can interview some of these guys, right? Have enough clout to be like, hey, Mr. McFarlane, let's come sit down with us.
Let's see if we have time for you today, Mr. McFarlane. Oh, no, Liefeld's here first, and, no, but I'd definitely interview Todd over, and it's a Todd father, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I would
next number.
I'd be happy to interview any artist. Anyways, go on. Sorry, you're number 2.
Yeah, we'll take. That's all right. My number. We'll talk at number 9. We're going down 9 here. This, you can put this probably anywhere, but I'm going to say don't buy into the hype. And I've done that, not to thousands of dollars, but I've definitely listened to way too many top 10 shows like our own.
Yeah.
But they were dealing with books of top 10, and I bought for that reason because it was on that list. Or because I saw it on the list, I saw it in an antique store and I picked it up, figuring there was some margin there. And to my chagrin, to my downfall in that particular book, is I didn't sell it right away. You got to sell when the selling's good. Don't hold on to it. Usually when the trailer hits is when you sell it, and whenever the movie's over, buy it back.
Yeah, so I'll jump on this one because this is kind of one of mine, is patience versus FOMO. Like, yeah, I agree with you. Don't buy into the FOMO, because if there are 2 ways I think you could play the speculation game if that's your thing. One, you have to, let's just say, like, okay, they're gonna have a Fantastic Four movie. Nothing has been announced about it, right? So what you got to think to speculate is what books can I get cheap that could play a role in that movie, right? So like a lot of guys have been specking on annual number 6, first appearance of Annihilus, right? Then it's come out, rumors have come out that Annihilus is going to be the villain, right? Those guys that got that book cheap, that's now their point where they can start looking to sell it, right? And probably the peak of when you want to sell it's like you just said, like it's probably when the trailer drops. Like if you think that then the trailer drops and it's going to only keep going up until the movie, I think you're wrong. Like the max is like once that trailer hits and people see it, boom, put it on there. That's probably going to be your highest point to sell it, right? Or even honestly, like I said, when it just got rumored that Annihilus was going to be the villain, that may be your time because that's when other people are going to be FOMOing about that character, right? So that you want to maximize your buck there.
Right.
The other way would be just like you said. You find a book that you know is hot at the antique store, at the flea market, or I mean, you could even find sometimes in a dollar bin, right? If the LCS owner isn't as up to speed on all the news going on with movies and things like that, which a lot of them aren't. A lot of them aren't. They may have a book in their dollar bin that they don't realize popped for $20, right? You buy a book for $1, sell something for $20, great, something like that. But don't buy at the height, right? That trailer comes out, like, oh, I got to go buy that Annihilus now. It's like, you're going to pay for it. So
right.
That's the time to sell. And then once it dies down, if you want it, buy it then when it's cheap again.
That's usually the movement of those books.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I will say, like when it comes to hunting and things like that, if there are books that are on your list, have a good idea of what you want to pay for it. Because I've just come to like this understanding, like the books that I want, if you're patient and your idea behind what a cost is for it is reasonable, you will find that book. It may not be tomorrow and it may not be today. Sure, you could jump on eBay or you can go on Instagram. You can find that book today, but it may be outside of your price. But if you stay patient, you can find the price that you think is reasonable. It will come up. It's crazy. I find how often that happens. And I've heard that from many people.
I'm still waiting for that 181 to show up in the dollar bin book. So
yeah. Like I said, it's got to be reasonable. It's got to be reasonable. You may find that at a garage sale, maybe of some widow that doesn't know what she has, but otherwise,
yeah. I'm hoping.
Yeah. All right. So I guess that's back to me now. So again, this is also still kind of correlated with my first points, but it's have a basic understanding of grading yourself. Again, this isn't going to be everyone, but in my experience, which is again very short, but almost every single time I buy a Rook raw and I ask whoever's selling, what do you got? What's your estimate on a grade? Oh, I have it at 7.0 and I'm a conservative grader. Everyone says they're a conservative grader. And every time, I don't think once have I had an experience. Now, I have seen many people post that they've had a better experience where they've had someone say it's this grade and it's gotten higher. That has not happened to me yet. Again, my time in this hobby is very short. But typically I find I end up getting like 0.5 to 1.0 lower than their anticipated grade that I was told when I bought. So have an idea of basic understanding of grading. So you can say, if they say this is a 5.0, you'd be like, oh, I feel like this is a 4.0. They may not budge, but you can use your knowledge to then maybe work a better price for yourself.
Right. Point out some of the blemishes and whatnot.
Exactly. Right. You'd be like, hey, because of this, and this, I think it's actually this. So why don't I pay you the price that's a little lower than the 5.0 price, but maybe it's a 4.5 price. And, if it's a 4.0, 4.5, kind of a wash. So having a basic understanding is extremely valuable. Plus, if you want to use books to fund the hobby, right, being able to have the knowledge of like, this book is undergraded or this book's overgraded is also key to being able to then make money on the books that you have.
Yeah, and I submitted some books to CGC, and I had an idea of what I thought they would come back as. And the two books, I think I sent 5 in, and my Hulk 340 and my Punisher 1 from 1987, so the Unlimited series, were both as loved in regard to me as a kid because I had them since then. I read them just as much.
Yeah.
Right. The Hulk came back a 340. That light blue can show a lot of spine ticks. At least I thought that came back a 9.2. The Punisher came back. I think it was an 8.5 or what is it, an 8.0, and I thought they were almost the same in regard to their condition.
Yeah.
So that much of a difference.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's not guaranteed. You could be the world's best grader and say, "Oh, this book is a 9.0," and then it comes back in the mail and it's a 7.5. Like nothing is guaranteed. Like nothing. I mean, you could be pretty spot on often, but like there's no guarantee.
And I think that comes with my next point is using eBay over key collector, because if you read on eBay, before I get into the main point, but you read on eBay, and I do this myself, I put in this in there, I am not a professional grader. Please use the pictures to make your determination.
Yeah.
And I know some guys hate that. I listened to a YouTube video, Lords of the Long Box, and I think TiVo hates when people put that in there, or he's made some comments about that. I don't disagree with that. I get his point, but I'm not a professional grader. You're not, I don't think. So
nope.
I'm doing the best I can to give you an idea. Look at the book itself, and therefore knowing when you submit it, if you bought that book and you're going to submit it for a grade, that it could come back as less because I don't have any control over it. Neither do you.
Yeah. And here's a great point. Unless you work for CGC, guess what? You're not a professional grader.
No.
Like you could be good at it, but it doesn't make you may be good at it, but you're not a professional unless you're the one actually doing it for a job.
Right. And even to that point is, coming back on someone and say, if I said it was an 9.0 and it came back an 8.5, okay, that was pretty close. If I said it's a 9.0 and it comes back a 4.5, then I was way off. Yeah. There might have been something inside there that, again, that's something else with, knowing color touches and stuff like that. And I've stayed away from buying high-end books because I don't want to get burnt on that.
Yeah.
That's why I like buying graded books. And I learned that early on. So that's not something on my list here, because I learned that early on that I'd prefer to have a graded book over a raw book when I'm spending, $1,000 on a book, if I did spend that on a book. So
yeah, I think that's a good point to add. So if you are buying high-end raw books, watch some YouTube videos on how to check for restoration, right? Because you don't want to buy a high-end raw book. You put $4,000 on this book, and you're like, the guy said it's not restored, and then it comes back a purple label. You are going to be heartbroken, right?
Yep.
If you're buying a high-end raw book, ask as many questions as you want, right? You are deserved. If you're spending a lot of money on a book, you deserve even if you're buying not thousands of dollars a book, you can ask for as many pictures if you're not there in person to see it as you want. Don't feel bad or think it's a hassle. Like, they have to sell you the book, and you only have to buy it if you think it's a good deal.
Right. And you got to make your best judgment. You can be mad at somebody for that. That would be something that would piss me off big time. But if the person missed a grade by half a grade or a full grade, that's an opinion of a grader. But a restoration, slight color touch, like, you got to look through your book and find out. But some things can be missed, and I think that's a huge trust loss if you buy from someone and the book comes back restored.
Yeah,
but
I mean, it could even be like, you've heard guys like will change a staple, right? Like, oh, the staple's pulling out, and they'll put in a new staple. Boom, that's a purple label, and you may not even have thought to think about staples, right? So it's like, you need to have some idea of, if you're buying high-end raw books, I would highly suggest kind of having a grasp about what is restoration and whatnot.
Yep. But the main item besides eBay was also where I screwed up a lot was using the Key Collector app. I started with the comic book price guide because that was the only app I found that was free when I started off.
Yeah.
So I wish I would have paid for a more expensive app in the beginning, because I went to Key Collector because that was $2 a month, and their prices are off. eBay's the best gauge for recent price trends.
Yeah.
But
GPA tracks eBay, so if you use GPA, that will work as well.
But GPA doesn't have an app, do they?
I have no idea. I don't use it.
Yeah, I don't think CLZ, I don't think Cover Price, I don't think GPA, they don't have an app. Whereas Key Collector is a nice app, but it's not one that's on your computer. You have to have internet signal.
Yeah.
which half the antique stores I go to have no signal. So I can't even figure out if a book is a key or not because they all, this will tie to another one down later on. But a lot of books they look like they might be worth something. And this is another one I have on there. So I'm sorry if I'm using two, but it makes sense to use it now. But every number one does not need to be bought when you're at an antique store, even though it looks good. And my key collector app wasn't working. Maybe don't buy it, but sometimes it was a couple dollars. I might buy it to be on the safe side. And then you compile a whole big long box full of crappy books you shouldn't have bought. And that's a story for another day. But going back to it, eBay, if you have the signal and can use it when you're antiquing or picking, is the best bet to getting up-to-date pricing on and
Yeah.
hype, right?
Yeah.
But I did go to an auction. I bought a bunch of starting lineup cards or figures, and I saw on eBay that the most recent one sold for $100, and I got a bunch of the same player for $20. I barely sold one of them for 20. I didn't get 100 for it. So the other one's on sale, and I can't even get $20 for that one right now. So I don't know who bought that and if those sales are inflated. But I think I believe using eBay is your best bet, and then maybe sprinkling in a little bit of a cover price or key collector for some understanding of the key books and what makes them significant. eBay just gives you the price, but if you want to flip something, you're best off using the eBay price, in my opinion.
And that kind of ties into my next point, which is buying on eBay or Mercari is another app I've used when I first started, or at cons versus on social media. Right. So as far as I'm concerned, the best place to buy comic books is on social media, right? Mostly like Instagram or like Facebook buy sell trade groups, right? In my opinion, that's where I found easily the best deals, right? Two, right, with both eBay and Mercari, you're gonna have to pay fees, you have to pay tax, right? Social media, you're gonna probably just PayPal someone directly, and you have to worry about that. So that saves you a good amount of money. The two, I will say this, right? eBay is obviously going to be, if you need a book and you need it today, eBay is going to be your best thing, right? Because it has every book you could ever imagine available at almost any time. But again, I always encourage, be patient, wait for the book that you want for the price that you want. So where are you going to score on both eBay and Mercari? On eBay, you can snipe, not every time, but often you can snipe an auction for a low price because there's a lot of them out there. For example, I have both the Batman 423 and the ASM 300 that I have in my collection, which there are literally dozens of each of those books on eBay at any given day. So I just picked a couple auctions and I followed them. And on each of those, I found an auction that no one bid on, and I put in the one bid, and I got the minimum price for those two books, right? That's not always going to happen, right? But oftentimes you may be able to find a book that's on an auction that doesn't have many bidders and you can get it pretty cheap, right? Hulk 181 is another example where like you may be able to score one for a solid price if there's not many, because there's a lot of Hulk 181s on there, right? And if you can get in on an auction you find that isn't very popular, you might, I'm not saying there's, but there's a small chance you could snipe one for a good price. On Mercari, I found that people are more apt to just accepting offers. So you find something you like on Mercari, lowball the shit out of it and just give it a go and see what happens. Like they may not accept, but they also counter often to a much lower price, I've found. So that would be your advantage there from what my experience is. However, with what I don't like about them, and I've had this happen multiple times now on both eBay and Mercari, only buy comic books from someone that A, has lots of other comic books that they're selling on their page, and B, has lots of reviews saying that these guys are good. Because otherwise, it's like I've had so many idiots that have sent me a book that I paid a good, $50 for, $30 for, whatever, and they just send it in like a raw envelope, unprotected, and it's like you get it, it's like, what the hell is this, right? Whereas like if you buy on Instagram, most of the people that are going to sell you on Instagram, obviously not everyone, but you buy through reputable dealers on Instagram, they're going to go the hassle of packaging it up right, because I mean that's their reputation on the line. So I think it's if you buy from a reputable person. And then similarly, if you're selling, I think it's best to sell again on social media, Facebook trade groups, um, through consignment groups like Elite or Diamond Club or whatever. They have a small fee, but otherwise it's much less than like eBay's 13% fee. All right, and I can't remember what Mercari's is, but they take a good cut. And then lastly, I'll say when it comes to cons, again, I have very little experience. I've only been back in the hobby for a little bit of time. I think the best value at a con is kind of like going through dollar bins and 50% off boxes, right? In the couple of cons I've been to, it's just like the books on the wall. Like they know people are like always googly eyed at the cons for all these wall books, and they like, oh, let me up my con price to my normal price. Not saying that you can't get good prices. I would just be mindful. Again, it just goes back to have an idea for a book you want at the price that you feel is reasonable. Don't just go buy it off the wall. So,
yeah, cons are usually more expensive one way because they got to make their money back for the cost of the con. Your eBay sellers and Mercari know that they're going to be paying that fee, so they have to have less wiggle room or up the price of it. I have not bought anything from Facebook. I do not have a lot of trust in anybody on Facebook. I feel much better myself with the eBay protection if something came up. I have sold books on IG, and that has gone fine with people paying, and I've sold, and I think I haven't heard any issues from that, so that worked out. But I have not had any luck with Facebook, and I tried.
So I'll tell you two things there. One, so most of my buying on social media has been on Instagram, and most of my trading has been on the Facebook trade groups. However, most trade groups will say if you post book for sales, you have to put in there, otherwise they'll like reject your post. Payment via PayPal, guests and services, or whatever it is.
Goods and services.
And you by all means can talk to whoever it is. We're going to be like, oh, can we do friends and family? However, if you have an issue with comfortability buying on Facebook, do the guests and service. And even if they say, like, if you do that, I need you to add 4%, right? Whatever, 4%. Because then you have, just like eBay has a protection, PayPal has a protection. If you don't get what you like, you could get a refund through PayPal, because that's why you pay them the fee, right? Is for that protection. Friends and family, get references. And that's another thing too on Facebook. You absolutely, and I've been asked for references. I've given references. I've been asked other people for references. Like you can figure it out, right? You don't have to go in blind.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to trust somebody like that. So that's why I prefer Diamond and Elite and some of the others on there. There's many that do consignment, and they've vetted everybody, so you have much more protection that way. And there's a third party involved. eBay, I feel comfortable because you can get your money back. I have not done the Facebook just because, I've tried it. So maybe we'll do more of that in 2023. We'll see.
Elite and Diamond and Grails, those guys will make you give references because they're a bigger company, and they have to ensure that you get the book that you want, right? So they're not going to just let any Jamoki sell on their platform.
Jamoki. So that's a good point. I didn't have that down. But again, like I said, I have my preferences, but that's what you kind of got to find out to buy, right? If you want that book that you can't find at your local LCS, because mine don't have anything that I would want, and the antique store is not going to have them, because you're limiting yourself. So when you go online, you have much more to buy, and you better cover yourself. So
I'll also tell you too, on that note, like if you're looking for a book, don't be afraid to put like a little post on your Instagram story that says "in search of FF5," right? Or just people that you talk to, be like, hey, if you don't want to sell an FF5, shoot them my way, right? Because people are very friendly on Instagram, or just in the comic book community, I find. And so people are always willing. Like I've had a number of people ask me if you see one, and I've found a book and I've sent it to them, and it's worked out, or it's not worked out, but at least I've found some things for them. So people are very helpful, and it's very, very nice.
Yeah, I think Instagram's the best place to be. I wish I'd have got there sooner. That's something else on the list that we can bring them now, is just getting on Instagram much faster.
Yeah.
And having more of a presence by posting daily,
Yeah.
because then you start to work that algorithm to get more followers. And I believe once you get over 1,000, you make money. No, I'm just kidding. No, once you get 1,000, you can sell books, you can buy books, and you have more people that you can ask for that what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have like 10 followers, 100 followers, that's not enough
Yeah.
that people are going to respond back. You need 1,000 or more before you'll get those answers, I think.
Yeah,
I
and
believe at least
I
that's what
would
I've
add to
seen.
that, like, be as forward as you are comfortable being on Instagram. Like, even if there's a dealer that you like the books to sell, but like you can't afford one, or you want one but you can't, just feel free to just like reach out to these guys. Like, I have found that so many of them are just so nice and so helpful. And then if you build a relationship with them, right, it's easier to get a deal happening in the future, right? So it doesn't. It's
Yeah.
essentially like you said, is like make friends, right? Another way to do that is like comment on other people's posts, right? Because then they comment back on your post, and it all goes right. Everyone like it's just a kind of a, it works the algorithm out, and you make friends, and like the more friends you have on there, the more benefit you're going to gain from acquiring things for your collection.
Yep. Now this is off topic. We'll call it my number 5, and it's kind of ridiculous, but it would aggravate me, and probably aggravates most people who do dollar bin diving. Stay the hell away from Image. There are so many Image books from the 90s. They all look awesome. They have some great artwork. They had some great artists. They still do, but none of those books really take off unless you get lucky with something like The Last of Us, which was not that's not Image. That's Dark Horse, I believe. Um, one of the Prophet is, I hear, a movie coming out with Jake Gyllenhaal. I have 10 of those books because they were in every dollar bin I could find, and they haven't amounted to much yet. Maybe someday they will, but there are so many of them. There's so many long boxes full of that stuff. You don't find very many long boxes full of Silver Age Spider-Man books that aren't keys, but I think most people would rather have a bunch of Silver Age Spider-Man or Batman that aren't keys than a bunch of Wildcats or
So
Cyberforce.
it's funny you said that, actually, because I was listening to a podcast today. It's a newer one called Comics and Chaos, or Chaos and Comics, camera, but it's One True Nerd King, a guy named Phil, and Rage Theo, who a lot of people know if you're on social media with the comic community. But they were talking about, and I think it's their second to the previous episode, about the only non-Marvel and DC books, and I'm probably you can probably take Spawn out, I'm assuming too, that retain value once they've had content created behind them, is The Boys and The Walking Dead. Everything else that, like, like Paper Girls or what they're saying, is all not retained value. I haven't done the research behind that. That's what they mentioned. I thought that was a good point, though. So that kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying. Like, outside of Marvel and DC, like, that's an even more volatile market that you're getting into.
Yeah, and again, we've talked earlier before that the movies really never moved books in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Because we were coming off the 90s bust. So just because they're going to make a movie out of it like Paper Girls or a series does not mean it's going to take off like The Boys did. And even then, it didn't really take it. I mean, it's valuable, but it's not like, 181 yet. I don't think so. That's the other thing too, is staying away from the Image books, at least. And again, if you like the artist, I have no problem, picking up some of their later work or some of their 90s work. And they're it's like seeing mullets again. Like, it's a cool thing to see some of those covers, the foil covers. Buy it if you enjoy it, but it's not an investment. And the other one that used to get me every time was the Marvel's Greatest Comics and Super Action Comics. There is no value in any of those books, right? They're just retellings of old books. And early on, when I FOMO'd and wanted to get any Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom, I would buy the Marvel's Greatest Comics, because most of them were Fantastic Four, to find out they weren't worth crap, except the dollar I paid for them. So I thought, oh, look, I got Black Bolt's on this one, the Inhumans. I have Annihilus on this book. No, just a retelling of an old story.
Yeah.
And most of the time when they
if
redo them, they're not
if
worth
it's
it.
in the dollar bin, no big deal, right? Don't just spend hoping that it's going to be bigger than that, though.
Right. And a couple of them, I think I paid $8 for them, and I know, not it was the end of the world, but still, they looked good. But and I didn't know that those were, again, crappy, not a crappy series, but just readers. Those are reader books, not investment books.
Yeah. Next one for me, pretty simple one. Do every giveaway you find, right? Even if it's a book you don't care about.
Make sure you tag JP on every one of those giveaways.
Yeah, tag JP. I tag JP on a bunch of them, right? Again, it don't mean anything, but like even if it's a book you don't care about, you can add it into your pool to trade and sell and flip, and it just adds. And again, if it's a giveaway, you're getting it for free, right? You make $5 on it. Who knows? So like, there's no harm in entering the giveaway. So I would tell you, enter every giveaway you can see.
But do not enter the what are the ones that we just did? You were talking about before.
You talking about raffles?
The raffles, yes.
Yeah, raffles. Like I said, those cost you money. I mean, you may want to do some of those if you want, but those aren't free.
No. And luckily, I did one of them for $5 and wish I didn't. But it's $5. But there's a couple you saw for 100.
Oh yeah, I mean there are a few. Like it'll be like I saw, what was it, like a Journey into Mystery 83? So first Thor, and it was like 10 spots, $1,500 a spot. Get the hell out of here! Like I paid $1,500 for a chance at getting that book. God. Like I would rather just save my money to get that book for whatever it costs. But like I've done, I think 4 $10 raffles for a. I actually did it. It was a couple weeks ago. There was a Raw Daredevil 1 for a $10 raffle, and it was like, so that made it like they made it have like 200 people in the raffle, so they got $2,000 out of it. But like $10, a chance to get Daredevil 1, I was like, fuck it.
For
I didn't get
$10.
I've done that about 4 times for a couple other books. I have not gotten one of them.
Just as tell you what, take the $5, go to the casino. You probably do better there.
Probably. But do the giveaways; they're free.
Yep, do the giveaways. My next, as we get towards the end here, there's no real. This is probably my last. Let's see, I got 4 left, so my top 4. Let's call it the things I wish I knew the most. My biggest things here, and this one is low grade is better than no grade.
Yeah.
Okay. Early on, when I got into it, I had a friend tell me that I should only be buying 9/8, and I looked at a Spider-Man 300 to buy, and it was $6,000 for a 9/8, and I didn't buy it, thankfully. But had I bought that newsstand, that one would be worth. I think we saw it sell on
Elite for like 18,000.
18,000. But I still wouldn't have put $6,000 on a book back then, and there is no big deal to me on a 9/8 versus a 6.0, a 5.0 if you just want the book.
Yeah.
Right. I want a good presenting book I can put on the wall and say I have that copy.
Yeah.
That's really all I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I think for you and I, like the way we both think about this is we do the hobby for our pleasure and enjoyment, right? I could not advise anyone to say like, hey, you should put your entire retirement on comic books. This market is far too volatile, right? That being said, if you can afford high grade books, and that's what you want to do, by all means, we're not telling you not to do it. But for me and JP, I know it's just like, we love these stories. We love these characters. So we're just in it for the pleasure of like having this in our collections. Oh, I love Silver Surfer. I want a Fantastic Four 48. I got one. It's a lower grade, but it presents well. So as long as it presents well, I'm happy just owning a piece of history. I'm not saying I'm not looking for the highest value on it, but like I'm happy with, like JP said, low grade versus no grade. I just wanted to look nice. I'm happy to have a piece of history. This is a character I love. Boom.
Yep. That's the way.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Your next one.
Yeah. So the next one is kind of in hand with this, right? Is like you can't have it all, right? And when I first started, I was like, shoot, I want to get these old books that have characters I love, and I got to figure out what new books I got to get for these new movies. And it kind of goes back to the FOMO thing and doing this thing. My advice to you is if you want to get into the hobby or you're starting the hobby, sit down and think about what it is you actually like, right? We're obviously going to end this episode. We're going to say something like buy what you like. And it really does apply here. Sit down and think like, what do I want to buy? And what will make me happy? And just focus on that. If you want to be crazy like me, I think a good exercise, and JP's going to laugh at me, is 1, imagine in your head what your dream PC would be in terms of a quantity of books, right? We have an interview that we did with Jason from Omega Collects. His number was 10, maybe even to 20. Mine is probably in the 50 range. JP's probably a little bigger. Yours could be 400. Yours could be 400. or 40,000. Whatever that number is, have that in mind when you're buying books, right? Like I like to think so what I did is in my mind, it's like around 50. I made a list of what I wanted and I kind of edited it to kind of fit that list. That way, if I see something, even though it's a good deal, it's like I'm not going to get distracted buying this book because it's not on my list and it's not something that I want in my dream PC. Now, that being said, if you see a book that you can make good money off of, like I'm not going to tell you not to buy that, right? But this is like when you're buying books for your collection and you're thinking, have an idea of what the end goal is. That way you don't get distracted from other things.
Yep. And that goes with my next one is I have on here wait. I got into the hobby and my goal was to buy the books that I sold some years back or the ones I lost or shouldn't have traded. So those are books like ASM 300. I've said this before in the previous podcast, ASM 300, 298, 299, ASM 238. A lot of those were sold or traded for stupid reasons or whatnot. So my goal was to get those back and then also to get the ones I'm not going to say not allowed to have as a kid, but just couldn't justify the purchase because there were so many. New Mutants 98, Punisher 1, the miniseries, Secret Wars, just those iconic covers. And as it started, it was like a snowball effect for me because I got in slow, figuring I'll spend $500 and buy ASM 300. I'm done. That's the last. I'm not going to buy another book. And then what happened? Another book came on an Instagram that I wanted to buy, and then eBay, and and it just snowballed into, oh, I want that one too. So again, to what you said, making that list and seeing how many books you want is helpful. I do enjoy the hunt of it, so that's not the end all be all is making that list because I do enjoy the hunt. But again, waiting and going in slow may help you out as prices fall, obviously. But if this had been 2020 and at the end of it, and we slowly got into buying and we waited, we might have bought at the way top, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to middle bottom to bottom here. So again, this will tie into my next item, and but that again, like you said on yours, and this is my item too, is buy what you like, because end of the day, you're stuck with a book.
Yeah.
Once you bought it, if you like the character, you bought it. You're not going to get your money back unless you're going to file an eBay fraud purchase report. You're not going to. You bought it, right? You paid that price, and you were okay with it because it seemed reasonable. And I overpaid for some books, underpaid for others. And at the end of the day, I know what they were for the most part, but it was more of the enjoyment out of it. I got something, that I enjoyed that time of hunting and getting the books. And maybe someday I'll look back and say, damn it, I got to dump them all.
Yeah. On that note, that actually transitioned into my one that I had coming up is you don't necessarily aren't stuck with it, right? Understand, like, you learn how to trade or where to trade, like whether it be on the Facebook groups, on Instagram, or whatever. Like, even though you did that task of like your dream PC, opinions change, your collection evolves. Just because you have a book doesn't mean your money's gone, right? You can use that book, you can sell it, use that money, you can trade it. So I'm a big fan of trading. A couple things I would note on that. If you're thinking about trading and you want to buy books that you can have good trade value on, I still would only recommend buying books that you don't mind keeping in your PC if you can't trade them, right? Because not every book is easily tradable. So don't just get a book because you heard it's got good value. Someone else may not want it, right? So if you got it, make sure it's one you still would rather be happy to have in your collection. Were you going to say something, JP?
Yeah, that goes back to the eBay checking last sell on eBay to know if that book is liquid or not. That's not always a tell-all, but you see a bunch of them being sold for same price, and you can get out of this book if you need to, right?
Yeah, and I will say too, like if you're trading, you're probably, again, if you want to think about making good money off of your books, again, we're not an investment comic book podcast, but most books that make good money on return are books that are long-term investments. So if you're trading books, you're going to be dealing with books you've had more on the short term, and just understand that the market it's comic books, right? It's not a company like a stock. It's a comic book. So the market is volatile. So don't be so caught up, in my opinion, this is just me. You don't have to be so caught up on making a good profit on every book if you make a trade deal, right? At the end of the day, if the books you use to trade are expendable to you and they get you to a book that you ultimately want, most likely it's going to be a good trade, right? Obviously, don't screw yourself, but like, if you have a good idea, it's not the worst thing in the world to say like, oh, I bought that book for 30, but I traded it for $25 of value, right? Or something like. If it gets you to where you want to go and you didn't have to put in new money, it still can be thought of, and you can still feel it as a good deal.
Yep. Yeah, you gotta leverage what I said. I said earlier you're kind of stuck with a book once you bought it, but your point is, to trading aspect of it, yes, like you can move on from that book if it's liquid and use some of that value, because that's the other thing too. We talked earlier before we started recording is that many of us waste money on a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Coffee. If you live in Seattle, Starbucks.
Yeah.
You could I spent $5 on a Frappuccino in Niagara Falls this weekend. I got little enjoyment out of that. If you did it every day, that adds up to a lot. So there are stuff you waste money on, but with a comic book, a baseball card, any collectible, most likely, if you bought it right, you can at least get your money back for it or close to it.
Yeah.
Minus the enjoyment you had. So, again, buying right, and you're not stuck with it, but using the trades to leverage that money, because you're not really stuck with it, because it does hold some type of value. But but my last one was waiting, slow down. Again, that can be good or bad, depending on the market swing. But again, learning about,
Here, I'll be right back. Go ahead and finish up though with that point.
Yeah. So slowing down, but also realizing that this is not a business. So slow down so that you don't overpay, you don't overbuy, and you understand what you're trying to collect. But again, that changes over time. You're because of FOMO, because of movies that come out, books and hype come out of nowhere. So your collection are going to change. But this is not a business unless you are forming an LLC and you're buying and selling comic books for a living. So speaking of your trade value, speaking of my saying being stuck with a book, speaking of, having margin, all those are nice points, but this is not a business, right?
Yeah.
We're doing it for enjoyment. We want to make something out of it, make the hobby fund itself, whatever way that is.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's trading a book, you spent $50 on it, it's worth 100, and the guy likes that character and he's willing to give you 100 in trade value. Great. If he's only going to give you 25 and you don't really care about the book, you lost $25, but you got enjoyment. There's really, if you study economics, there's these things called, and I'm no expert on this thing, but there's some utility out of getting these items, and it's really hard to put a value on much of it, besides the dollars and cents of it. So it's not a business.
Yeah, totally. My last one, pretty simple one again, and I do have a couple other tips after that I'll go over, but is variants don't hold value for the most.
Come on now, acetate covers are the way to go.
I mean, for the most part, right? Sure, you have the jerkin variant that goes for tens of thousands.
The jerk off variant, right?
Yeah, I call it the jerk off variant. Yeah, but for the most part, variants don't, like, for example, you have that to jerkin variant. First Miles Morales is obviously worth crazy amounts, but you have the first print. That is the next kind of big, and not, they do have a newsstand one, but we don't need to talk about that. It's kind of an outlier. But they have the direct edition of the first print. Take away the jerkin variant, the first print one is your money book, right? There's a second print of the UF4, and it's Miles' face is not under the trade dress. That book is fun to have, but it's worth fractions of what the first print is, right? There's also, and I really like this variant that Sarah Pichelli drew, where it's just like Miles taking off the mask and his head is the big image on the thing. Similarly, that's not worth that much, like compared to the first print, right? Again, taking the jerkin variant out of it. So for the most part, if if there's a book you want to get, like, I got to get all 19 variants of it. It's like, slowly roll. Most of those variants aren't going to be worth anything, or at least hold good value.
That's one of the things. I was at an antique store over the weekend, and DC made so many different variants, and Art Adams did a few, Jim Lee did a few, and I have them on the wall here. Some of them, they're cool looking books. But I mean, if think of it as either you're buying a piece of art that you're going to hang on your wall, or just a cool book to look at later on, because not every variant is, like you said, worth really
Yeah.
anything. And I don't know if they will hold value long term
Yeah.
as a blue chip. Take the Djurjevic variant out of it. Would you spend 40,000 on that book versus an AF-15?
No, hell
That's
no. Hell
so.
no.
Again, that's what I have. That's what I think about the variants. They're cool for the artwork, but not,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
And then I just if you got nothing else, I got a few just like kind of general tips I think that everyone can use and probably does use. But one, don't be afraid to ask for a deal. Right? Oftentimes you'll see a book and it'll be like $400 OBO. OBO stands for or best offer. Right? So don't be afraid to make it a best offer. Right? Two, it may say like $400 firm. That maybe don't throw an offer there, but you could also just maybe ask like, how about $400 shipped, right? That we don't pay any more for shipping. Always find it when I've made offers. At the worst case, I get shipping paid for. So often that works out pretty well. So don't be afraid to ask, and that kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. Make friends, guys. It's easier to work deals when you now have a good relationship with people. Two, right? You're going to obviously be having books shipped to you. Keep all that shipping material, right? The Gemini mailers, the bubble wrap, the boxes that slabs come in. Because, like I said, if you get in the flipping game and the trading game, why go buy new stuff when all that stuff is perfectly recyclable, right? And that stuff, it can add up.
Hide that stuff from your wife, because if
Yeah.
my stuff is like piling up and she's like, "What is all this stuff for?"
Yeah,
I'm going to sell the books.
Yeah. And then the last one would be, or the last two would be, don't be shy to tell people that you collect, right? I guess some people are like afraid of like being mocked because it's kind of nerdy.
You might get beat up.
At the end of the day, you never know. Someone may be like, "Hey, so and so's dad's getting rid of his comics. Who do I know that likes comics? Oh, Rohan likes comics." And then next thing you know, you found something pretty cheap that's got a lot of value to it. So don't be afraid to tell people you collect. And then also just on that note, right? Comics can be found anywhere. JP's found them at all kinds of flea markets and antique stores, right? So always keep your eyes out, right? I know there's a story I've seen online of Alex Comic Hoarder found a Journey to Mystery 85, which is the first Loki. He found it at a pawn shop. So, and he got it for steal. So
that's
always
one
keep
I
your
haven't
eyes
tried
out.
yet. I might try that.
Yeah, I want to like. I think he bought it for like $300 at the pawn shop, and then he did a YouTube live sale, and he sold it for $1,000. And like honestly, that $1,000, like that, the book that he had it graded at like a 2.0, and it's worth more than $1,000. But he was just like he gave somebody like $1,000 for this, and it got bought within 2 seconds. So he paid $300 and sold it for $1,000.
That was what Story Lunch Money told us about the gentleman who found the
the FF48 the FF48
the
first sold it for $40 or whatever it was.
Yeah, he bought it for 40, sold it for 700. Then the other guy who bought it for 700, sold it for 1,200. So
yeah,
it's all perspective there. And your guy for the Journey into Mystery got it for a great price, willing to give it up for a great price, even within reason. And I'm sure someone's able to grade it and get even more money for it. So
yeah,
3 different people got enjoyment there. So that's the great part about the hobby.
Yeah.
My last point before we finish, and this is coming in. This is good for the Endgame movie and good for Ant-Man Quantumania. If I can go back in time, what I wish I knew now, I'd tell myself, go buy 181 and 129 in 1994 and just hold them. That would be my biggest tip to anybody. If you can get a hold of a time machine, go back in time, buy those damn books, and hold on to them.
Well, I mean, if we got a time machine, I'm going back to 1939 and I'm buying Action Comics 1.
True, but my time machine only goes back to 1994. That's all I can go back to. It's broke, but no, yeah, that's kind of a funny point. But I mean, again, wishing what we knew now, we knew then. It's all a learning game. We've learned a lot in a year. I learned a lot in the 40 years I've been collecting, seeing many different cycles. Learned a lot, but we're still here to learn more. We're not professionals. We're just non-geek, non-nerds that like to talk comics.
Yeah, and these are our lists of 10, and there are still several other things that we probably haven't thought about that we could have wanted to know when we started. So comment on if you have any points of your own. Hit us up to talk, like we always say. But otherwise, peace out.
Yeah, thanks everybody. We'll talk to you on the next episode. Looking forward to it. Have a great rest of your week. Talk to you later.
Later.
Peace.